Today we are going to talk about the conflict-related sexual violence. What is conflict-related sexual violence? It's a sexual violence that is linked to a past or ongoing armed conflict and is committed on a widespread or systematic basis. It is perpetrated by military forces and non-state armed groups, and those who command it are motivated by military and political objectives. Conflict-related sexual violence is recognized by the international law and in some jurisdictions by states as well. The legal acts that specifically address the conflict-related sexual violence is UN Security Council Resolution 1820, which was adopted in 2008. Resolution 1820 recognized that women have a legal right to be protected from sexual violence, even during war, and survivors have a right to reparations. This is the most important part of it. But we all know that war is brutal, and almost none of the human rights make any sense during the war. But wars still have some rules, and international humanitarian law, international criminal law apply to the armed conflicts. And the reason why we need gender equality even during the war is that civilians are the majority of those who are affected by armed conflicts. It's obvious, unfortunately. And women and girls are impacted differently and disproportionately. Even though the majority of people who are affected by armed conflicts are civilians, and women and girls are affected more. Unfortunately, in peacemaking and peacekeeping processes, women and girls are excluded. In addition to that, the reason why we need gender equality during the war is that women and girls face increased risks of gender-based violence, and they also have more caregiving responsibilities during conflict and after conflict. And among civilians, women and girls are those who are particularly targeted by using sexual violence. And sexual violence, when we talk about the conflict-related sexual violence, we talk about the widespread practice, but the definition of the sexual violence is that it's a tactic of war to humiliate, to dominate, instill fear in, disperse, and or forcibly relocate civilian members of a community or ethnic group. And unfortunately, like wars, despite condemnation, they still happen, and conflict-related sexual violence also continues to happen, and in some situations have become systemic and widespread. And as a rule, it reaches appalling levels of brutality. Gender-based violence should be addressed in peacemaking and peacekeeping processes, and that's the reason why women's participation in peacemaking and peacekeeping is really, really important. In addition to the international humanitarian law that I mentioned, and the primary purpose of the international humanitarian law is to protect the victims of the armed conflicts. We have a UN Convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women that prohibits discrimination against women during the war and peacetime. The convention was adopted in 1979, and it entered into force in 1981. And the implementation of the convention is monitored by the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, so-called CEDAW committee. So this is the most important the international human rights instrument that exists and that is primarily focused on the women's rights. States have an obligation to report at least every 4 years, and the CEDAW committee issues general recommendations to state parties. And one of the general recommendations is about conflict-related sexual violence. So the general recommendation number 30, which was adopted in 2013, is dedicated to women in conflict prevention, conflict and post-conflict situations. And the purpose of this recommendation is to provide guidance to state parties on legislative policy and other appropriate measures to ensure full compliance with the obligation under the convention to protect, respect, and fulfill women's human rights. And when we talk about respecting and protecting women's human rights, we mean all times. Advancing substantive gender equality before, during, and after conflict, and also ensuring that women's diverse experiences are fully integrated into all peace building, peacemaking, and reconstruction processes. We have already mentioned that international humanitarian law protects women against rape, forced prostitution, and other forms of assault. But it's very important to mention that international humanitarian law gives priority to expectant mothers, and also protects them from the death penalty. And as for the international criminal law, Rome Statute of International Criminal Court obligates states to prevent, investigate, and punish trafficking and sexual and gender-based violence, and also it recognized that trafficking in women and girls, rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, forced pregnancy, enforced sterilization, or any other form of sexual violence can constitute a war crime, a crime against humanity, an act of torture, or an act of genocide. So to sum up, the conflict-related sexual violence is condemned by the international law, and international law recognize that women and girls are particularly affected by the conflict-related sexual violence, because they are the target of the sexual violence. And when the sexual violence is used as a war tactic, women and girls will suffer most. And that's exactly why women and girls should not be excluded from the peacekeeping and peacemaking processes, because one of the issues that should be addressed in peacekeeping and peace building should be the conflict-related sexual violence. Thank you so much.